Now, what I'm about to say is going to run contrary to what many of you currently think. I hope that we will understand who the man is that's talking to you. And I further hope that you will remember the principles of natural law and biblical law that I've already given you. Because if all you remember from this point is what I say from this point onward, and you don't remember anything that I've already said and given you, then this whole message is in vain. Totally, absolutely, thoroughly meaningless. If you cannot comprehend, and at least in conscience, give your approbation to those natural law principles I've already established. I didn't establish, I've already provided. Then anything else I say from this point on is absolutely futile and means nothing. I want you to bear with me as I work my way through what I'm about to say and hear it to a conclusion. And don't have a knee-jerk reaction like so many have already had, but let me take you through this. Agree or disagree is not my goal here. I will, at this point, share with you my personal opinion of what happened in Oregon. Again, hear me through it, because what I say at first, I'm going to continue saying other things later, and so you need to hear the whole thing. And again, whether you agree with me or not is not the issue. I respect your right to disagree. Point number one. And again, everything I'm saying as a result of every principle that I've already taught. It's not isolated. Number one, and I've already said this, after the occupation of the federal refuge outside Burns, Oregon took place, I wrote a column regarding my thoughts on the matter, and I said things from this pulpit reflecting my thoughts on the matter. I will repeat now what I said then in condensed form. Bundy Ranch was just because it was a lawful defense of life, liberty, and property. The Oregon occupation was unjust because it was armed aggression without the consent of the body politic. The natural right of self-defense is not extended to armed aggression. Even the Hammonds repudiated Ammon Bundy's tactics at the refuge. Ammon Bundy and the others were defending no one. Ammon Bundy was not defending the Hammonds. Hammonds had already fought their fight and accepted their fate and had repudiated the help offered by the Hammonds. By Ammon Bundy. The protest in Burns previous to the occupation was just and right and was very helpful in gathering public support for the cause of the Hammonds and the Bundys and the other ranchers affected by the unjust tactics of BLM. There was a positive response by the community of Burns to the protest. Some 600 to 800, most of them Oregonians, were there in support of the protest. It was right it was proper, it was good, it was just. But when Ammon Bundy and the others decided to take their guns and to aggressively take over a federal building, they left the natural law justification of self-defense. And they became aggressors. That is a fact. Whether we agree with Ammon Bundy about the cause, whether we feel empathy for his family, for the Hammonds and the others, is not the issue. When they took aggressive, armed action, occupying a federal facility, it was unlawful, unjust, and against natural law. They had no right to do that. Then you and I have the right to go down here over summer recess and take over a school building with arms and say we're not going to leave. Or go take over a courthouse over the weekend and say we're not going to leave with arms. Sorry. We no more have the right to do that than you have a right to come to my home when I'm not home with guns and say, I'm taking over your home and I'm not leaving. Principle applies in both directions. It's an act of aggression. Not only that, it's an act of armed aggression. And they were wrong, in my view. They were wrong. The beginning of this entire episode started wrong, in my view. Number two, Ammon and his supporters were aliens to Oregon. In a real sense, they were invaders. They had no jurisdiction. They were not defending their own property or their families. When we stood side by side, and I stood side by side, as did some of you here, with Ammon Bundy, with Ryan Bundy, and with Cliven Bundy, and the others that were there at Bundy Ranch, we stood shoulder to shoulder there. Where were we? We were there at their request, the Bundys who lived on that ranch. It was their property. It was their land. It was their cattle. It was their lives that were being defended. That was not the case in Oregon. No lives were being defended. Not Ammon's family or any of the other men's families that were there. They chose to be there. They were not invited there. The people of Oregon didn't invite them there. The Hammonds did not invite them there. In a real sense, they were aliens in a foreign state. They have no jurisdiction, no authority. This was not an act of self-defense. This was an act of armed aggression. Number three, they were given multiple opportunities to leave safely without arrest or harm. The sheriff and others pleaded with Ammon to leave. Promised safety, no harm would come, no charges filed, just leave. Take the protest somewhere else, take it to the next level, keep the thing alive, do what you got to do, but leave this facility. And they refused to do so each time. If they had left when they had the opportunity, there would have been no harm done to any one of them. They thought their cause was just. I give them that. I don't believe it was. But I give them their conscience. They believed it was just. They were acting on conviction. so be it. In refusing to leave, in refusing to submit to the laws of the state of Oregon, they put themselves in a state of war. And if they didn't understand that, then they didn't know natural law well enough. But whether they knew it or whether they didn't, that's what they did. On Saturday, before this happened on Tuesday, and what you should know, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of school. I can't even see you over there. Give me a real dirty look if I'm saying stuff out of school. From the time this happened, from the time it began, the occupation, until the very end, good men from Oath Keepers were on site negotiating between law enforcement and the protesters. They had established a great relationship, I think is a word that is not hyperbolic, a great relationship with the FBI and with other law enforcement personnel on the ground. Law enforcement on the ground convinced the Oath Keeper fellas that it was their desire that this end peacefully, that there be no harm done to anyone. And they maintained that position throughout the entire episode. You may not realize that much, if not most, of the negotiations that were taking place between Oath Keepers and the protesters. The FBI was actually allowing them to negotiate for a peaceful settlement of this situation. Some of those guys worked around the clock. There were some of those guys that got no more than 2 hours sleep every night for almost 3 weeks, working frantically to try and save lives. This whole episode lasted so long because of this effort on behalf of so many of these good patriotic men that were there on the ground in negotiation and representation and as a liaison between parties, again, feverishly working for a peaceful settlement. Ammon Bundy and the others refused every opportunity to peacefully settle the matter. As late as Saturday, before the event happened on Tuesday, Oath Keeper guys were on site talking to Ammon in the refuge and telling him the patience of the people of Oregon is wearing out. The people of Oregon were demanding the sheriff do something. The people of Oregon were demanding that the state police of Oregon do something. The body politic of Oregon was pressuring the law enforcement people of that state to get rid of those people from Oregon. Not to kill them, I'm not giving that impression, but to end it, arrest them. The body politic was in support of law enforcement in Oregon. It was not in support of the protesters in Oregon. You got to understand that. The pressure was coming from the body politic, not Washington, D.C. They told them, this is going to come to an end soon. They said 48 hours. They only missed it by 1 day. They said in 48 hours you're going to be in jail. If you don't walk away now, you're going to be in jail. How are you going to help the cause from in jail? You're taking yourself out of the fight. We need you in the fight. We don't need you in a cell block. They wouldn't listen. And it happened just as Oath Keepers said it was going to happen. Law enforcement did not want a Waco-type event. That's why they chose the road to apprehend them and didn't try a rush on the building. They didn't want a shootout. They didn't want dead bodies all over the place. Number 4, the arresting officers were serving, and you got to understand this, they were serving lawful court-ordered arrest warrants. This was not an ambush. They were serving lawful court-ordered arrest warrants. Now, if a judge issues a warrant for your arrest and an officer of the court comes to fulfill that warrant and take you into custody, if you want to put yourself in a state of war, go ahead. But expect the consequences. As for me, if they have a legitimate warrant for my arrest, I'm going to let them take me peacefully, civilly, willingly, and I will fight in court. It was a lawful arrest warrant, plural, that they were serving on these fellas. I want to say to every one of you here in this audience and those of you that are watching online, if you have not already purchased and watched my attorney son Tim Baldwin's lecture on police contact, how to respond, I beg you to get this video. I beg you to get this video. This video will teach you how to save your life in a potential stress situation with police contact. Everything LaVoy Finicum did as the driver of that white truck, everything he did was in complete violation of every law and every protocol, as Tim taught us in this video not too many weeks ago. Every possible law and protocol LaVoy violated in the way he responded to those police officers trying to execute a lawful arrest warrant. Number 5, Ammon Bundy and all of the others in the 2 vehicles were arrested peacefully and with no injury to any party. Ammon Bundy and the other 2 occupants of the Jeep in the lead vehicle surrendered as they were instructed. They did so peacefully. They were taken into custody peacefully. There was no harm done, no bloodshed, no loss of life. If Mr. Finicum had done what they did in the Jeep, if he had followed Ammon Bundy's example and had given himself up at the initial arrest point, all of the events that everybody is so passionate about today would never have happened. Would have never have happened. Mr. Finicum will be alive today. There would have been no gunfire, no bloodshed, no loss of life, no issue except we can debate the whole issue of the whole thing that brought it about. Well, people will be debating that forever. That's fine. That's not what the issue is today. The issue is the death of a man. A man who, if he had just done what he should have done and what everyone else did in the other vehicle, would still be alive today. regardless of all of the other facts notwithstanding that happened at the actual site where the shooting took place. It would have never happened. Number 6, LaVoy Finicum openly told the world in press conferences on several occasions that if there was an attempt to arrest him, they would have to kill him. He would not be taken alive. He said that over and over and over. He said it. I will not be taken alive. I will not go to jail. They will have to kill me if they try to arrest me. He said that over and over. My opinion is he proved that he meant what he said. Give him credit for his conviction. I do. I give him credit for his conviction. That was his conviction. He drew a line in the sand on that issue. What, am I going to draw a line in the sand on that issue? No. I already told you where my line in the sand is drawn. Do I think someone else should draw a line in the sand where he did? No, I don't. Do I respect his conscience? Do I honor his right to draw the line in the sand where he did? Yes. In fact, if you really want to look at it in one way, he might be the only man of the group that really was a man of conviction for the cause that they were in. I think he was a good man, an honorable man. But he, in no uncertain terms, promised everyone who heard him, I will not be taken alive. I will not allow myself to be arrested. They will have to kill me. You cannot separate that from this equation, folks. Number 7, there is no testimony or evidence that the one man in the truck was shot after begging LaVoy to stop the vehicle and then surrendering to authorities, as the witness stated. There's absolutely no video evidence of that. And there is no corroborating testimony that that ever took place. I have serious suspicions about that man. I'll get to that in a minute. But when the Jeep that Ammon was in pulled over and peacefully surrendered, and LaVoy made the decision to pass them and to continue going down the road, thus avoiding arrest, that passenger, and I'll not name him, but if you've studied this very much, you know who I'm talking about, begged and pleaded with LaVoy to stop the vehicle. It's not worth it, he screamed. Stop, stop, stop. And about 200 yards down the road, he stopped. And that man got out of the vehicle and peacefully surrendered to law enforcement. And then LaVoy speeds away with the remaining passengers on board. What did that man know? What was he thinking? Why did he act the way he did? Very suspicious. I believe, and I'll say this more in a minute, but I guess I get ahead of myself here and just say, I am convinced that there were agent provocateurs in the Bundy group that talked Ammon Bundy and the others into doing what they did, that they were not part of the cause, but their only purpose was to injure Ammon Bundy and the others and to impugn the liberty movement as a whole. And they did a great job. If they're not on the payroll of the federal government, they ought to be, because they're doing a lot of free work. Number 8, when LaVoy sped away from the police stop and tried to run around the police roadblock, it wasn't a barricade, it wasn't an ambush, it was a roadblock, a typical roadblock for such a case. 3 police cars in the middle of the road forcing an oncoming vehicle to stop. When he tried to run around the police roadblock, God bless him, Mr. Finicum endangered the lives of every passenger in that vehicle and violated every law and protocol for properly responding to a police officer. Whether it would have been with police bullets, which it wasn't, thank God, or whether when that vehicle came to a crashing stop in the snowbank next to the roadblock, he was traveling at anywhere from 60 to 70 miles an hour at least. When he came upon that roadblock, braked, and then tried to go around, crashing into that roadblock, I submit to you, it was a miracle of God that the passengers inside that vehicle were not injured just from the impact of the crash. That was all on LaVoy. Those passengers could have had broken necks. Broken necks are the most common injury in any kind of a crash such as that. I submit it's a miracle of heaven that the passengers were not hurt from the crash of the vehicle. Obviously, he never even thought of their safety when he decided to take that vehicle at whatever miles an hour into that snowbank. And number 9, and this is where many of you are going to disagree with me. Be patient. In my opinion, and I'm not listening to what others tell me, I'm seeing. I'm basing it on my own personal view, irrespective of anyone else's position. In my opinion, the video shows that LaVoy did not have his hands up when he was shot, and instead twice pulled his coat back with one hand and inserted his strong hand to retrieve his weapon, at which point he was shot by the Oregon State police officer. In my view, Mr. Finicum was going for his gun when he was shot. And I know what some of you are going to say afterward. I've seen those same videos you've seen. I've heard all the radio talk show guys and all the other analysis. I'm just telling you, I have looked at that video over and over and over in preparation for me standing up in front of you and telling you what was going to be my honest opinion. And I looked at it objectively, critically, as best of my ability, asking God to show me what I was seeing. I believe he was going for his gun when he was shot. And if he was going for his gun when he was shot, it was a justifiable self-defense shooting by the Oregon State police officer. If. I will say to you also that I am very aware that even today we don't have, hopefully, all of the information that we're going to have. I am absolutely open-minded in my heart, and if there is further evidence to convince me that what I just said to you was not what happened, then I will absolutely, positively, and publicly retract my position. If I can be convinced, objectively and critically, that that's not the way it happened, I will say so. But as I stand in front of you right now, knowing that I have got to address this, not only for you, but also for those that are out there, I have to be honest with you today. I believe the man honored his word when he said, "I won't be taken alive." And at this point in my analysis, I do not charge those officers with murder. I don't. And I know that many of you might. And that's fine. Remember the first part of this message. Make sure your conscience is right, that you're not predisposed to pronouncing guilt because of a preconceived hatred. It bothers me when I hear people that immediately rush to judgment without any of the facts being presented to the American people, based solely upon one person's testimony, which, as we know now, that testimony was highly inaccurate. But people took that as gospel, adjudicated guilt to all of the officers involved, even accused the government of a Waco-type conspiracy, calling it ambush, murder, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, if it was the intention of law enforcement to kill those people, none of them would have left that scene alive. Number 10, the video reveals that the testimony of LaVoy that he was shot on the ground after he was down was proven to be not true. It is not true. The testimony, the witness said they stood over him and shot 6 bullets into him after he was on the ground. That did not happen. It was an untruthful testimony. Number 11. The video reveals that the testimony that over 120 rounds were fired into the truck was not true. The truck was not fired into, except by the FBI agent as LaVoy was trying to avoid the roadblock and actually ran into the agent with the truck. And as he did so, and which is standard police protocol, he fired 2 rounds into the front windshield toward the driver in an act of self-defense. That's justifiable protocol in any police manual. The witness said that the truck was filled with gunfire, 120 rounds, she said, pumped into the vehicle by the agents after LaVoy was shot. That did not happen. The video shows the truck intact at the end of the episode. Everything is said and done. Everybody's in custody. It's all over. The truck is intact. There are no bullet holes. If you want to look at what 120 bullets would do to a vehicle, I invite you to go look in the museum where Bonnie and Clyde's vehicle is on display, and that's what a car looks like when over 100 bullets go into it. Ladies and gentlemen, common sense. nobody survives inside a vehicle with over 120 rounds of live ammunition going into that vehicle. No one walks out. No one walks out. You saw every passenger in that van walk out, hands high in the air, walking normally, full body function, full body movement, no limitation of hand, no limitation of leg. They were unharmed. There's no way that could have happened if 120 .556 rounds and 40 caliber rounds and whatever else rounds, shotgun rounds, were all put into the body of that car. Sheet metal, you can shoot through sheet metal with a high-powered rifle or pistol, like shooting through a hollow core door. Those bullets ricochet inside that vehicle, causing undescribable carnage. That testimony was untruthful. What did happen, of course, is they used those, what we in layman would probably call flashbangs, grenades, to disorient the passengers inside, which, by the way, were armed. There were several arms still inside that vehicle. Don't forget that. The officers knew there were arms in there. They didn't know when any time one of those passengers would start shooting from inside the vehicle. They had no way of knowing that. They introduced through a shotgun a pepper spray type of gas to encourage the passengers to come out, which it did. And the witness did get that right. She talked about the gas that was introduced to them, and that's where that came from. That's number 12. The rest of the passengers left the vehicle in good physical condition and were unharmed by the arresting officers. Hands up. They didn't shoot them. Why would they shoot LaVoy Finicum with his hands up, surrendering, and then not shoot the other passengers whose hands up and surrendering? That makes no sense. There was a reason they shot Mr. Finicum. His hands were not up. He was going for a gun. It doesn't matter that this is someone that we like, someone that we philosophically agree with, someone that we would consider a brother in the cause of freedom. That's not the issue. There's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And if we are so jaded in our thinking and understanding that we are not able to objectively analyze truth from false, right from wrong, and we're basing it totally on personality, then we are really in trouble. Because the cause is greater than any one person. Number 13, the only one to die in the incident was the man who came out of the vehicle, screamed at the officers to kill him, which the testimony is consistent with that. That's what he did. He jumped out of the vehicle. The tires were still going in his four-wheel drive. The engine was not off at all. It's still engaged. Tires still going, slippery in the snow. Comes out, bolts out, screaming to the officers, "Kill me now, kill me now." Hands up at first and then drops them later to try and get to his gun. Had he peacefully surrendered, as did the others, he would still be alive right now. If he would have peacefully surrendered, he would have been as alive as all the others are alive. No one else was harmed, not even Ammon Bundy, who was the leader. Ammon Bundy is alive and well tonight because he followed the protocols given him by the police and surrendered. As I mentioned, Oath Keepers personnel worked tirelessly behind the scenes as liaisons between the occupiers and law enforcement. Their testimony, and I heard this from my own ears, their testimony is that law enforcement, federal, state, and local, did everything they could do to resolve the situation peacefully and without bloodshed. They will tell you that to this day. that law enforcement did not have a bloodlust, that they were not trying to injure people, they were doing everything they can to prevent injury. And they would have succeeded in this case had not Mr. Finicum violently resisted arrest in the way that he did. The problem is when some people started foaming at the mouth over the internet in the wake of this event, jumping to conclusions with no evidence. At that point, they had no evidence. All they had was one eyewitness testimony, of which now we know was very inaccurate in many places. And they got on their computers and they started throwing out all these accusations. They were putting lives at risk. They were inciting violence and hatred against people that were still on the ground, trying to resolve the situation peacefully even after the arrest had taken place. There were still people in the refuge following the arrest on the highway. There were still people that had to be dealt with. The Oath Keepers were still on the ground, negotiating, pleading, helping, assisting. Can you imagine what would have happened if a bunch of people armed only with the exaggerated testimony of an unreliable witness and the constant barrage of assumption and criticism with no critical thinking and no legitimate analysis and no evidence to go on, and suddenly a bunch of hot-headed anti-government people show up with guns at the refuge? My God! The loss of life could have been horrific. It was a life and death situation. It was active. And people were on the internet calling for civil war. Go back to what I said at the beginning of natural law. We owe our fellow man. We are accountable to our fellow man. If those accusations, unfounded, exaggerated accusations, would have resulted in bloodshed, which may have included our friends, including some of them in this room, and I might have to be preaching the funeral of a good man. Because a bunch of hotheads took a bunch of unfounded accusations and got a bunch of guns and marched to a place and started shooting up a situation when they absolutely had no idea what they were doing. Who would have been accountable for that? The people who got on the internet and who called for revolution and civil war without having the facts and without having the knowledge and without having the discernment to realize, hey, wait a minute, lives are still at stake. This is still an active situation. There are still innocent people on the ground. There are still our own fellow patriots on the ground working to intercede for truth and justice and liberty on the behalf of all of us. Here's my observations. We must search our conscience in light of biblical and natural law, in light of biblical and natural law. All the things I brought to you at the beginning. We have to search our conscience about some things. Number one, do we believe the God-ordained principle that government is ordained of God and that resistance to authority must be just in the eyes of God and the body politic, not just our own eyes? Do we believe that or not? Yes. You better search your heart. Do we believe the God-ordained principle that government is ordained of God, that resistance to authority must be just in the eyes of God and the body politic, not just in our own eyes? We are fallible. We make mistakes. We can be premature. We can get it wrong. We need the body politic. Secondly, are we lovers of liberty, wanting truth, or are we haters of government who only want to promote ourselves and get our own way? Which is it? Examine your conscience. Are you loving liberty or are you hating government? If you're hating government, you're not qualified to call yourself a patriot. You don't even know the meaning of love of liberty and freedom. You are filled with self-will, bitterness, anger against an institution that God Himself created, knowing therefore the terror of the Lord. We persuade men. I am still pursuing truth in the Oregon matter. As I said already, I'll adjust or change my opinions accordingly. But are you doing the same? Or have you made your mind up from the very beginning before you knew any of the facts? Before you had any evidence? You had your mind made up and you're sticking to it because that's what you want to believe. You want to believe the government murdered that man. You want to believe that this was a conspiracy of government. There are enough real conspiracies and real evil for us to face. We don't need to manufacture anymore. If you take the position, let me give you one more thing to think about. If you take the position that the police officers fired prematurely and therefore unjustly, and one could make that argument. One can say, why didn't the policeman wait until his gun was actually drawn before he shot? I saw one video that claimed to show the gun in LaVoy's hand. It's only one video I've seen of that sort, and I don't place a lot of confidence in it. And it was very fuzzy and difficult to see anyway. So, but some would say, well, the policeman was premature. He should have waited until he showed the gun, which would have made it easier on us, looking at it from a camera above. But if you're that policeman on the ground, what would have been your call? That was his life, not yours, at stake. If he was reaching, I say if again, if he was reaching for his gun, at that moment the police officer was justified in firing his weapon. At that moment. But here's my point. If you take the position that the police officers fired prematurely and therefore unjustly at Mr. Finicum, why are you not fighting mad about the many, many, many black people in our large inner cities that are shot prematurely and unjustly frequently? What is it? It's only the death of white people that we get upset about? It's only the death of patriots that we get upset about. The black community in the inner cities of Chicago and New York and Boston and all around the United States go through unbelievable difficulties in law enforcement contacts. You talk about finding something to get mad about. Just get on that same computer that you've been using to try and cite civil war in Oregon. Get on Google, whatever your search engine is, and just start looking up police shootings of black people in the big cities of America and see what comes up. And no one comes to their defense except some in the black community themselves. Why aren't we concerned about their lives? Life is precious, regardless of what color it is, or what political ideology it has, or what part of the country it comes from. Life is life. If there's injustice going on and the police are trigger happy in the inner cities and shooting a lot of these young black men that don't deserve it, we should be as upset about that as we would be if Mr. Finicum were unjustly shot. But we're not. We don't bombard the internet with civil action against the perpetrators of those unjust shootings, the ones that are, and some of them are. We don't get on call for civil war. Conscience, folks, conscience, right with God, truth, natural law. It's not personality. It's not political popularity. It's not whether we like them or whether we agree with them or whether they're on our side or whether they're on their side. The natural law principles in our relationship with our fellow man is all conclusive. Anything less than that is bigotry and prejudice. If we expect government to obey the law, we must also obey the law. Are we using, number three, are we using our influence to objectively and honestly persuade men with truth? Is our goal to persuade? Or are we just gullibly allowing those who hate government, or maybe agent provocateurs, to have their own personal agendas and manipulate us until we become pawns in the hands of our enemies? When we don't think for ourselves and we don't think critically and we don't use our reason and we don't use our God-given conscience clear with Him to analyze and study these issues and come to conclusions based upon those gifts of God given us as human beings, and we just act emotionally and irrationally and presumptuously, taking people's word for stuff without corroboration, without evidence, we are being manipulated by others. We are not fighting a freedom fight. We are helping to enslave the people that we say we are trying to free. I truly believe that there were agent provocateurs in Bundy's close friends that did not have his interests at heart, were trying to set him up for what exactly happened. we might have agent provocateurs in this church. I could be looking at agent provocateurs right this minute. You have been sent here to incite us. You have been sent here to inflame us, our passions. You've been sent here to try to manipulate us into doing something stupid like Bundy did, so that it can make the entire liberty movement look bad and take our cause backward. What Ammon did, as much as I love Ammon and appreciate him and know his heart and all that stuff, what he did and his fellow supporters set the liberty movement back. It didn't help us. It's hurt us in the eyes of public opinion. You know, one thing I didn't get to, and I can't believe I missed that in my notes. Thank you, Lord, for reminding me of that. This is back in the first section. It's where it belongs. In the Old Testament, it was the prophets who were the ones that tried to persuade the people of Israel when it was time to lawfully, justly, righteously resist evil government. And we can go through the Old Testament, and I do it quite often in this platform. The prophets would get up and beg the people to resist the tyrannical government over them with God's anointing on their message. And sometimes the people responded, and sometimes they didn't. But it was God's men who were the ones educating and teaching and persuading the men of Israel in how to resist evil government. And the real problem is America. I doubt that any other pastor in this town today has gotten up in front of his congregation and provided any insight, any principle of right and justice and natural law and biblical law to explain to his people what we should do and what we should not do in situations like this and why. The problem in America is that the men of God are not teaching their people. They're not persuading anybody in the principles of liberty. That's the biggest problem we have in our country. The Mormon elders are not teaching the Ammon Bundys of the Mormon church. The Baptist pastors are not teaching their people. The Presbyterian pastors, the Methodist pastors, the Lutheran pastors, the non-denominational pastors. They're not persuading their people with truth and law and righteousness and conscience and justice. The people are ignorant. Don't know what to do. And so they're doing what they think is right in their own mind. That doesn't work. By acting, number 4, presumptuously and emotionally, we are serving to drive people away from the truth and assisting the very enemies we claim to be resisting. Number 5, the natural biblical laws of liberty recognize the right of the body politic, the state, or even region to lawfully separate from abusive government, but not individuals acting as a mob. You know, the problem is, if you really want to put your energy where it needs to be, why have the state governors and legislatures in these western states, why have they sat back for the last 30 plus years and allowed BLM and a couple other of these federal agencies to run roughshod over the citizens of their states. It's time that we insist that our governors and state legislatures stand up for the people of their states. And if you want to talk about separation, you're looking at a guy that's all in favor of separation, if it's done under the laws of God and the laws of nature. Pass a petition for Montana to declare independence, and I'll sign it the first chance I get. Regions have a natural law right. States have a natural law right, with the approval of the body politic, to separate from any government they deem to be tyrannical. I think maybe not in my lifetime. I'm starting to get to be an old geezer. So it may not happen in my lifetime. Sooner or later, it's inevitable. Separation is inevitable. You young people that are here that will maybe live to see it, just make sure that you're part of something that's right and just and righteous and lawful. And if it is, give it all the gusto you got. If you as an individual want to separate yourself from the society's government, you can. Write up a Declaration of Independence for yourself. Publish it, put it in the newspaper. Let everybody read it, put your name on it, put your signature. And then what you'll have to do is appeal to another country, or even your own country, for political asylum. I mean, that's what people do when they're coming to a country from another oppressed nation. They apply for political asylum. That's what you have to do. But you have to understand that when you do that, you are removing yourself from the benefits and the protection of society. When you separate from the bad, you're also separating from the good. You don't have the luxury of picking and choosing what you keep and what you give up. Understanding, too, if you place yourself in a state of war against society, you'll be treating accordingly. And you have to accept that. I think in his mind, Mr. Finicum had decided that was his position, his conviction, and he was going to do it, and he did it. If that's your conviction, and you want to place yourself in a state of war, fine. Your conscience, your heart tells you to do it, fine. Understand, though, that you are in a state of war, and you will be treated accordingly. If you're willing to accept that, then that's your decision. Number 7. If we truly love and fear God as Christians or as God-fearing people, our job is to persuade men, knowing that we are manifest unto God. God knows our heart, and are made manifest in our own conscience, knowing therefore the terror of the Lord. Be careful. The terror of the Lord is upon those who violate His divine laws. If you are truly a government hater, and you only want to be an authority to yourself, you refuse to recognize anybody else's authority over you, and in your heart and in your soul, you are truly a hater of government. If that is true, I say again, Liberty Fellowship is not the place for you. We don't need you. That's not what this fellowship is all about. Plus, if you didn't come here to share and assist the vision, message, and mission of Liberty Fellowship, but only came to try and use your friendship with other people as a vehicle to build your own fellowship, you should do the honest thing if you have a conscience. You should do the honest thing and find a fellowship and a pastor with which you can assist the vision, message, and mission, because Satan is using you to try and thwart what God has raised up Liberty Fellowship to do. This whole episode has made it clear to me, in my position as a public personality in the freedom movement, I must and I will separate myself from those who are truly the government haters. I want no association with them. I want no part of them. They are not biblical, Christian, or even right according to natural law. And if anything else this has done, it has clarified in my mind the need going forward, and I'm going to make this clear going forward. This is not about hatred of government. This is about love of liberty and right and principles and constitutional government and decency and honor and virtue and all those things upon which our society is built. And I refuse to allow Liberty Fellowship to be taken over by people who hate government and are going to try to use that spirit of hatred to infect this fellowship and poison what God has raised this fellowship up to do. Understand this too, that the good, honest police officers at every level are completely unaware of the nefarious practices of the dark side of government. Please remember that. There are good men and women out there. Summarizing everything that I've said, everything we do affects the rest of us, either positively or negatively. We cannot take a position that I can do what I want to do without accountability. Rush to judgments, presumptuous accusations, personal agendas based on bigotry and hatred are tools of Satan to destroy us. Knowing, therefore, the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. But we are made manifest unto God, and I trust also are made manifest in your conscience. Let's stand for prayer.